Maria Santos stood at the edge of the military training ground, her small frame barely visible among the towering male recruits. The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty field where the M24 sniper rifle lay waiting on the table. At 22, she had joined the army against her family's wishes, leaving behind her job as a seamstress in a small Texas town. The other recruits snickered as she approached the weapon. "Look at that tiny thing trying to handle a real gun," whispered Sergeant Johnson to his buddy. "She'll probably fall backward from the recoil." Their laughter echoed across the training ground, mixing with crude jokes about women belonging in kitchens, not combat zones. Maria had heard it all before. Growing up as the only daughter among 5 brothers, she learned early that actions spoke louder than words. Her father, a former ranch hand, had taught her to shoot when she was just 8 years old. While other girls played with dolls, Maria spent her afternoons practicing with an old hunting rifle behind their farmhouse. The training instructor, a gruff man named Corporal Hayes, called for silence. "All right, listen up. Today we're testing your marksmanship with the M24 sniper weapon system. This isn't a game, people. In combat, your ability to hit your target could mean the difference between life and death for your entire unit." As each recruit took their turn, the scores were mediocre at best. The wind was tricky that day, gusting from different directions, making accurate shots nearly impossible. Most soldiers barely hit the outer rings of the target at 300 yards. When it was Maria's turn, the snickering grew louder. "Watch this disaster," someone muttered from behind her. Maria ignored the comments and carefully examined the M24. She felt its weight, checked the scope alignment, and studied the wind patterns by watching the grass move. Her breathing slowed as she positioned herself, remembering her father's words. "The rifle becomes part of you, mija. Feel it, don't fight it." The first shot rang out, dead center. The laughter stopped abruptly. "Lucky shot," called out Private Martinez, trying to salvage his wounded ego. Maria didn't respond. She simply adjusted her position slightly, accounting for a wind shift she had noticed. The second shot hit the exact same spot. Then the third. By the 5th consecutive bullseye, the entire training ground had fallen silent. Corporal Hayes approached the target with his binoculars, his expression shifting from skepticism to amazement. The 5 shots had created what looked like a single, perfectly centered hole. In 20 years of military service, he had never seen anything like it. "Santos," he barked, "where did you learn to shoot like that?" "My papa taught me, sir," Maria replied quietly, her voice barely audible above the wind. The other recruits exchanged glances, their earlier mockery replaced by grudging respect and, in some cases, resentment. They had been outdone by someone they considered inferior, and it stung their pride deeply. That evening in the barracks, the atmosphere was tense. While some soldiers began to show Maria a new level of respect, others doubled down on their harassment. They hid her gear, spread rumors about her receiving special treatment, and made her daily life miserable in countless small ways. But Maria endured it all with quiet dignity. She had learned from her brothers that bullies only respected strength, and she was determined to prove herself through her actions rather than her words. Every day she outperformed her peers on the shooting range, consistently achieving scores that seemed impossible to others. The news of her exceptional marksmanship began to spread beyond their training unit. Other instructors started visiting the range to witness this phenomenon for themselves. Some were impressed, others skeptical, believing the reports to be exaggerated. As weeks passed, Maria's reputation grew, but so did the isolation she felt from her fellow soldiers. She ate alone, trained alone, and spent her free time writing letters to her family back home. Her mother's responses were filled with worry and pleas for her to come home, while her father's letters were brief but proud. The mockery had evolved into something more dangerous: jealousy and sabotage. But Maria remained focused on her goal. She hadn't joined the army to make friends. She had joined to serve her country and prove that determination mattered more than preconceived notions about what a soldier should look like. Little did she know that her exceptional skills were already being discussed in military circles far above her current rank, and that her journey was just beginning. 3 months into her training, Maria's exceptional abilities caught the attention of someone she had never expected to meet. Colonel Rebecca Walsh, one of the few high-ranking female officers in the Army, arrived unannounced at the training facility. She had heard whispers about a female recruit whose shooting scores were breaking records, and she needed to see for herself. The morning was particularly challenging. A fierce storm had passed through the night before, leaving the ground muddy and the air thick with humidity. The wind was unpredictable, shifting directions every few minutes. Perfect conditions for separating the truly skilled from the merely lucky. "I want to see Santos shoot," Colonel Walsh told Corporal Hayes, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. Word spread quickly through the barracks. The other recruits gathered around the shooting range, some hoping to see Maria fail spectacularly in front of such an important visitor, others genuinely curious about what would happen. Maria felt the pressure of dozens of eyes watching her every move. Her palms were slightly damp with sweat, but her breathing remained controlled. Colonel Walsh had set up an impossible challenge: 5 targets at varying distances from 400 to 800 yards, each one smaller than the last. The final target was barely the size of a dinner plate. "The conditions are terrible today," Colonel Walsh announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Even our best snipers would struggle with this wind. But let's see what all the fuss is about." As Maria approached the firing line, Private Rodriguez whispered to his friend, "She's going to embarrass herself in front of the colonel. This isn't basic training anymore." Maria picked up the M24 and immediately noticed something was wrong. The scope had been tampered with, deliberately misaligned to throw off her shots. She could have complained, could have asked for a different rifle, but instead she simply adjusted her grip and compensated mentally for the sabotage. The first target was at 400 yards. Maria studied the wind patterns, watching how the grass moved at different distances. She noticed that the wind was creating a spiral pattern, stronger at ground level but calmer at height. Her first shot accounted for this, and the bullet found its mark perfectly. The second target required her to adjust for the increased distance and a crosswind that had suddenly picked up. Again, her shot was flawless. By the third target, even the skeptics in the crowd were paying serious attention. The fourth shot was the most challenging yet. At 700 yards, with shifting winds and a target barely visible through the humid air, most professional snipers would be happy to hit anywhere on the target board. Maria's bullet struck dead center. The final target at 800 yards seemed impossible. The wind was gusting unpredictably. The humidity was making the air thick and difficult to read, and the target was barely a speck in the distance. Maria took longer with this shot, studying every variable she could observe. She closed her eyes for a moment, remembering her father's teachings about patience and instinct. When she opened them, her vision seemed clearer, more focused. She squeezed the trigger with the gentleness of touching a soap bubble. The shot echoed across the range. For several seconds, nobody moved. Colonel Walsh raised her binoculars to check the distant target, and a slow smile spread across her face. "Perfect," she announced. 5 perfect shots under impossible conditions." The silence that followed was deafening. Some of the recruits who had been her harshest critics stood with their mouths open in disbelief. Others nodded with grudging respect, finally understanding that they were witnessing something truly exceptional. Colonel Walsh approached Maria personally. "Soldier, I've been in this army for 18 years. I've seen some incredible marksmen, but what you just did defies explanation. Tell me, what's your secret?" Maria thought for a moment before answering. "Colonel, my father always told me that shooting isn't about the gun or the target. It's about understanding everything in between. The wind, the air, the ground, even your own heartbeat. You don't fight these things. You work with them." That evening, Colonel Walsh made several phone calls to her contacts in military intelligence and special operations. Maria's name was added to a very short list of soldiers being considered for advanced sniper training. But she wouldn't learn about this for several more weeks. Meanwhile, the atmosphere in the barracks had shifted dramatically. Some soldiers who had previously mocked her now sought her advice on improving their own shooting. Others, particularly those whose pride had been most wounded, became even more hostile. Maria found a note on her bunk that night. "Freaks don't belong in the army." She crumpled it up and threw it away without a word, but the isolation she felt was growing deeper. Excellence, she was learning, often came with a lonely price. Still, she continued to excel in every aspect of her training, not just marksmanship. Her physical fitness scores were above average, her tactical knowledge was sharp, and her discipline was unquestionable. She was becoming the complete soldier, even as some of her peers remained convinced that her success was somehow undeserved. 6 months after her extraordinary demonstration, Maria received orders that would change her life forever. She was being transferred to Fort Bragg for advanced sniper training under the notorious Sergeant Major William Iron Mike Patterson. The other recruits called this assignment Hell's Kitchen because Patterson had a reputation for breaking even the toughest soldiers. The bus ride to Fort Bragg was long and lonely. Maria carried only a small duffel bag with her personal belongings and a letter from her father. "Make us proud, mija," he had written. But remember, true strength comes from knowing when not to pull the trigger. When she arrived at the advanced training facility, she quickly realized she was the only woman among 30 elite soldiers handpicked from various units. These weren't fresh recruits. They were experienced marksmen, special forces operatives, and decorated veterans who had already proven themselves in combat. Sergeant Major Patterson was exactly as intimidating as his reputation suggested. A mountain of a man with scars covering his arms and a voice that could shatter glass. He looked at Maria with undisguised skepticism when she reported for duty. "So you're the miracle shooter everyone's been talking about," he said, circling her like a predator sizing up prey. "Let me tell you something, Santos. I don't care if you can shoot the wings off a fly at 1,000 yards. In my program, shooting is only 20% of what makes a sniper. The other 80% is what separates the legends from the corpses." The first week was designed to eliminate the weak. They crawled through swamps filled with snakes and alligators, carrying full gear for miles without rest. They memorized terrain maps while being subjected to sleep deprivation and psychological pressure. They learned to remain motionless for hours at a time, ignoring hunger, thirst, and bodily discomfort. Many of the elite soldiers who had entered the program with such confidence began to crack under the pressure. 3 quit in the first week alone, but Maria endured every challenge with the same quiet determination that had carried her through basic training. The other trainees initially ignored her, assuming she would wash out quickly. But as days turned into weeks, they began to notice her consistency. While they struggled with fatigue and frustration, Maria seemed to draw strength from adversity. "How does she do it?" wondered Staff Sergeant Mike Chen, a former Army Ranger who was struggling to keep up with the physical demands. "She's half our size but twice as tough." The answer lay in Maria's childhood. Growing up on a struggling farm with 5 older brothers had taught her that complaining was useless, and that the only way to earn respect was through relentless hard work. While her fellow trainees saw the challenges as obstacles to overcome, Maria saw them as opportunities to prove her worth. The psychological warfare was particularly intense. Sergeant Major Patterson would single out trainees for verbal abuse, testing their mental resilience under pressure. When he turned his attention to Maria, his attacks were especially vicious. "You think you belong here, Santos?" he would scream inches from her face. "You think playing dress-up soldier makes you one of us? This isn't a game, little girl. In combat, your weakness will get real soldiers killed." Maria never flinched, never responded with anger, never gave him the emotional reaction he was looking for. Her composure under psychological pressure impressed even Patterson, though he would never admit it publicly. The technical aspects of advanced sniper training were where Maria truly shined. They learned about ballistics, wind reading, range estimation, and target identification. While other trainees struggled with the complex mathematics involved in long-range shooting, Maria absorbed the information effortlessly. During a particularly challenging exercise involving multiple moving targets at various distances, Maria achieved something that left even Sergeant Major Patterson speechless. She successfully engaged 7 targets in 12 seconds, each requiring different calculations for wind, distance, and movement speed. Her accuracy was perfect, her speed was inhuman. "Impossible," muttered Corporal James Wright, a former Marine sniper with 2 tours in Afghanistan. "Nobody shoots that fast and that accurate, not even in the movies." But it was Maria's performance during a nighttime stealth exercise that truly set her apart from her peers. The assignment was to infiltrate a mock enemy compound, identify specific targets through reconnaissance, and eliminate them without being detected. Most trainees were caught by the defending force within minutes. Maria moved through the darkness like a ghost. Her small stature, which had been a source of mockery during basic training, became her greatest advantage. She could hide in places where larger soldiers couldn't fit, move through tight spaces without making noise, and remain undetected for hours at a time. She successfully completed the mission, eliminating all targets and extracting without being seen. When the exercise ended and she emerged from her hiding spot, several of the dead defenders jumped in surprise. They had no idea she had been so close to them. That night, Sergeant Major Patterson made a note in her file. Subject displays exceptional fieldcraft abilities beyond her training level. Natural instincts suggest prior hunting survival experience. Recommend for accelerated advancement. However, success continued to breed resentment among some of her fellow trainees. They began to suspect that she was receiving special treatment or inside information. Whispers of teacher's pet and worse followed her through the barracks. Even though Patterson was notably harder on her than anyone else, the isolation was becoming unbearable. But Maria found solace in her evening routine of writing letters home and studying advanced ballistics textbooks. She knew that excellence often came with loneliness, but she was determined to see her journey through to the end. After 8 grueling months of advanced training, Maria graduated at the top of her class, but her celebration was short-lived. 3 days later, she received deployment orders to Afghanistan. The war was intensifying, and skilled snipers were desperately needed on the front lines. Her unit was stationed at Forward Operating Base Chapman, a dusty outpost in the mountains near the Pakistani border. The base was surrounded by hostile territory, where Taliban fighters moved freely through caves and mountain passes. The soldiers stationed there lived under constant threat of attack. Captain David Rodriguez, the unit commander, was initially skeptical about having a female sniper in his ranks. "I don't care what the training reports say," he confided to his lieutenant. "Combat is different. When bullets start flying and people start dying, we'll see what she's really made of." Maria was assigned to work with Corporal Tommy Mitchell, an experienced spotter who had served 3 previous tours. Mitchell was professional but distant, clearly uncomfortable with the arrangement. "Look," he told her privately, "nothing personal, but I've got a wife and kids back home. I can't afford to babysit out here." Their first mission was routine reconnaissance, observe enemy movement patterns in a valley known to be a Taliban supply route. They hiked for 6 hours through treacherous mountain terrain to reach their observation post, a rocky outcropping that provided excellent visibility but minimal cover. For 2 days, they watched and recorded enemy activity. Maria's patience and attention to detail impressed Mitchell despite his initial reservations. She spotted movement that he missed, identified weapons and equipment with remarkable accuracy, and maintained perfect discipline during the long hours of observation. On the 3rd day, everything went wrong. Their position was compromised when a local shepherd spotted their hiding place and reported it to Taliban fighters. Within hours, Maria and Mitchell found themselves surrounded by enemy forces moving through the rocky terrain below. "We're screwed," Mitchell whispered, studying the approaching fighters through his binoculars. "There's at least 20 of them, and they know exactly where we are. We need immediate extraction, but the helicopter can't get here for at least 30 minutes." The Taliban fighters were using the rough terrain to their advantage, moving from rock to rock in a coordinated assault pattern. They had automatic weapons and rocket-propelled grenades, while Maria and Mitchell had only their sniper rifle, sidearms, and limited ammunition. "Contact base," Maria said calmly, settling into her shooting position. "Tell them we'll hold this position until extraction arrives." Mitchell looked at her as if she had lost her mind. "Hold the position?" "Against 20 armed fighters."
"We need to run now!"
But Maria was already studying the enemy through her scope, calculating ranges and wind conditions with the speed of a computer. The first Taliban fighter was moving confidently up the slope, believing that 2 isolated soldiers would be easy targets. Her first shot dropped him instantly at 600 yards. The sound echoed through the mountains and the other fighters immediately took cover. But Maria had already shifted her aim to the second target, a fighter carrying an RPG who posed the greatest threat to any rescue helicopter. The second shot was even more difficult. The target was partially concealed behind rocks, with only his shoulder and part of his head visible. Maria's bullet found its mark with surgical precision. "Jesus Christ," Mitchell breathed, finally understanding what he was witnessing. "Keep shooting. I'll call for air support and guide you onto targets." For the next 25 minutes, Maria held off the entire Taliban assault force single-handedly. She fired with mechanical precision, never wasting a shot, never missing her target. When fighters tried to flank their position, She spotted them first and eliminated the threat before they could get close. Her shooting was so accurate and deadly that the surviving Taliban fighters began to panic. They had expected to overrun 2 isolated soldiers quickly, but instead found themselves being picked off by an invisible marksman who seemed to anticipate their every move. When the rescue helicopter finally arrived, they found Maria calm and collected, her rifle still warm from continuous use. Around their position lay the evidence of her incredible marksmanship. 11 enemy fighters eliminated, with 11 precise shots at ranges from 400 to 100 yards. The helicopter crew was stunned by what they saw. "Ma'am," the crew chief asked Maria as they loaded her and Mitchell aboard, "how many shooters were up there with you?" "Just her," Mitchell answered, his voice filled with awe and newfound respect. Just her. The story of Maria's single-handed defense spread through the military like wildfire. 11 confirmed kills in one engagement was extraordinary for any sniper, but doing it while under siege and protecting a wounded spotter elevated her actions to legendary status. Captain Rodriguez personally visited her the day after the mission. "Santos," he said, "I owe you an apology. I doubted you and I was wrong. What you did out there saved not just Mitchell's life, but potentially dozens of lives if that Taliban force had been allowed to continue operating in that area." But the most meaningful recognition came from her fellow soldiers. The men who had once questioned her presence in their unit now looked at her with genuine respect and admiration. She had proven herself in the ultimate test, actual combat, and emerged victorious. Mitchell, whose life she had saved, became her most vocal supporter. "I've served with some of the best soldiers in the Army," he told anyone who would listen, "but I've never seen anything like what Maria Santos did on that mountain. She's not just a good soldier, she's a warrior." That night, Maria wrote a long letter to her father, describing the mission and its outcome. "Papa," she wrote, "I remembered what you taught me about patience and precision, but I also learned something new, that sometimes the most important shots you take are the ones that protect others." Word of Maria's extraordinary combat performance reached the highest levels of military command. Within weeks of her mountain defense, she was reassigned to a special operations unit tasked with eliminating high-value targets throughout Afghanistan. Her reputation had transformed from that of a curiosity to a genuine military asset. Her new commanding officer was Major Sarah Thompson, a veteran special operations leader who had requested Maria specifically. "Santos," she explained during their first meeting, "you've proven that you can perform under pressure. Now I need to know if you can handle the psychological weight of targeted elimination missions. These aren't random enemy combatants. These are specific individuals whose deaths will save American and Allied lives." Maria's first high-value target was Ahmad Hassan, a Taliban bomb maker responsible for improvised explosive devices that had killed dozens of coalition soldiers. Intelligence had located him in a compound deep in enemy territory, but previous attempts to capture or eliminate him had failed due to his extensive security measures and the compound's isolated location. The mission required Maria to infiltrate alone, establish a concealed position, and wait for the perfect opportunity. She spent 3 days moving through enemy territory at night, sleeping in hidden caves during the day, surviving on minimal food and water. When she finally reached the optimal shooting position, Maria discovered that Hassan had chosen his location brilliantly. The compound was situated in a narrow valley with limited angles of approach, surrounded by loyal fighters who maintained constant surveillance of the surrounding hills. For 2 days, she observed the target's routine, noting that Hassan appeared outside the compound only twice each day, briefly in early morning and again at sunset for prayer. The shots would have to be taken at extreme range over 1,000 yards, with multiple obstacles and unpredictable wind conditions in the valley. On the third evening, as Hassan emerged for evening prayers, Maria took the shot that would cement her reputation. The bullet traveled for nearly 3 seconds through shifting air currents over rocky terrain and found its target with lethal precision. Hassan was eliminated before his security team even realized what had happened. Maria's extraction was equally impressive. She moved through 15 miles of hostile territory over 2 nights, evading numerous search parties sent to find the mysterious sniper. When she finally reached the extraction point, she had been alone behind enemy lines for 6 days, living off limited supplies and her own survival skills. The successful, Elimination of Ahmad Hassan marked the beginning of what military historians would later call the most successful sniper campaign in modern warfare. Over the next 8 months, Maria completed 17 high-value target missions with a perfect success rate. Each elimination was accomplished with a single shot, often under impossible conditions that had stymied other snipers. Her legend began to spread among enemy fighters as well. Taliban commanders issued warnings about a ghost shooter who could kill from impossible distances. Some fighters refused to venture outside during daylight hours in areas where Maria was known to operate. The psychological impact of her reputation became as valuable as her actual eliminations. But success came with unexpected challenges. Maria found herself increasingly isolated, not from hostility this time, but from the reverence of her fellow soldiers. They treated her with such respect that normal conversation became difficult. She was no longer just another soldier. She had become a living legend, and legends were harder to befriend than people. The mental toll of her missions was also accumulating. Each target eliminated was a human being, and despite their crimes against coalition forces, Maria felt the weight of each death. She began experiencing nightmares and struggled with questions about the morality of her actions. Even though she understood their necessity, Major Thompson recognized the signs of psychological strain and arranged for Maria to speak with a military chaplain. "What you're feeling is normal," Chaplain Williams assured her during one of their conversations. "The fact that these missions affect you emotionally proves that you haven't lost your humanity. The day you stop feeling the weight of these actions is the day you should stop pulling the trigger." During this period, Maria received a letter that would sustain her through the darkest moments of her deployment. It was from the wife of Sergeant First Class Robert Chen, one of the soldiers whose life had been saved when Maria eliminated a bomb maker targeting his convoy route. "Dear Maria," the letter read, "I will never meet you and you will never meet me, but I wanted you to know that because of what you do, my husband came home to our children. Our daughter took her first steps last week and our son said his first word yesterday. These moments exist because of your courage and skill. Please stay safe and know that there are families like mine who pray for your success every day." The letter reminded Maria of the larger purpose behind her missions. She wasn't just eliminating enemies, she was protecting families, saving lives, and contributing to the eventual peace that would allow soldiers to return home to their loved ones. Her most challenging mission came in her 10th month of deployment. Intelligence had identified Khalil Mahmoud, a Taliban leader responsible for coordinating attacks on coalition bases throughout the region. Eliminating him would significantly disrupt enemy operations, but he was protected by an elaborate security network and rarely appeared in the open. The mission required Maria to position herself in an abandoned village that had been booby-trapped by Taliban forces. She spent 4 days carefully navigating through explosive devices and concealed weapons, moving only at night and remaining absolutely motionless during daylight hours. When Mahmoud finally appeared, the shot was the most difficult of Maria's career. The range was 200 yards, the wind was gusting unpredictably, and she had only a brief window of opportunity before the target would disappear behind cover. The pressure was enormous. Missing would alert the entire enemy network to her presence and likely result in her death or capture. Maria's shot was perfect. Mahmoud was eliminated instantly, and his security team spent hours searching for a sniper they would never find. Maria extracted successfully, but the mission had pushed her skills and endurance to their absolute limits. Maria's final mission in Afghanistan would become the stuff of military legend. Intelligence had discovered that 3 high-ranking Taliban commanders were meeting in a remote compound to plan a massive coordinated attack on coalition forces. The meeting was scheduled to last only a few hours, and it represented the best opportunity in months to eliminate multiple key targets simultaneously. The challenge was unprecedented. The compound was located in a heavily defended valley, surrounded by natural barriers that limited approach routes. Previous reconnaissance had failed to identify any suitable sniper positions within effective range. Military planners had concluded that the mission was impossible for a single sniper. Maria disagreed. She had identified a potential position on a mountain peak that other analysts had dismissed as too distant and too exposed. The range would be nearly 1,400 yards. At the very edge of the M24's effective capability, and the position would leave her completely exposed to counterattack once she opened fire. Santos, this is suicide, Major Thompson warned during the mission briefing. Even if you make the shots, you'll be trapped on that mountain with nowhere to run. We're talking about a 3-day hike just to reach the position, and there's no guarantee of successful extraction. But Maria had studied every aspect of the mission for weeks. She knew the terrain, the weather patterns, the enemy's response capabilities, and her own limitations. "Ma'am," she replied calmly, "this is what I trained for. If we don't take this opportunity, hundreds of coalition soldiers will die in their coordinated attack. I can make these shots." The infiltration took Maria 4 days, moving only at night through some of the most treacherous terrain in Afghanistan. She carried everything she needed for a week-long mission: food, water, ammunition, survival gear, and the tools necessary for the most important shots of her career. When she finally reached the mountain position, Maria discovered that the shooting conditions were even worse than anticipated. The altitude was affecting her breathing, the wind was strong and variable, and the distance to the target compound was at the absolute maximum range for accurate shooting. For 36 hours, she waited in complete stillness, observing the compound through her scope and studying every detail of the target area. The 3 commanders were scheduled to meet at dawn on the 3rd day, and Maria would have only minutes to engage all 3 targets before enemy forces located her position. As the sun rose on the morning of the meeting, Maria's scope revealed all 3 targets in the compound courtyard, standing together and discussing their planned attacks. The distance was 1,387 yards. The wind was gusting from multiple directions, and the morning air was creating heat mirages that distorted her view. Her first shot eliminated Commander Rashid, the primary target responsible for most coalition casualties in the region. The bullet took nearly 3 seconds to reach its target, and by the time the sound of the gunshot echoed through the valley, Rashid was dead. The second shot came 30 seconds later, before the other commanders could take cover. Commander Nazir fell as he ran toward the compound entrance, struck down by a bullet that had traveled through shifting wind conditions to find its mark with deadly precision. The third commander, Hakim, had almost reached safety when Maria's final shot ended his life just steps from the compound door. 3 shots, 3 kills, all at extreme range under impossible conditions. But as Maria had predicted, her position was now compromised. Enemy fighters were already moving toward her mountain, and helicopter gunships were approaching from multiple directions. She had perhaps 20 minutes before they would reach her location. What happened next became the most controversial aspect of her legendary career. Instead of attempting to escape, Maria remained in position and began engaging the approaching enemy forces. For the next 4 hours, she held off over 100 Taliban fighters, preventing them from advancing up the mountain while calling for extraction support. When the rescue helicopters finally reached her position, they found Maria wounded but still fighting. She had eliminated 43 enemy combatants during her mountain defense, using every round of ammunition she carried and several weapons taken from fallen enemies. The helicopter crew chief later reported that Maria was unconscious from blood loss when they loaded her aboard, but her last words before losing consciousness were, "Did the mission succeed? Are the commanders eliminated?" News of Maria's incredible feat reached General Patricia Hayes, the commanding officer for all coalition forces in Afghanistan, within hours. General Hayes immediately flew to the medical facility where Maria was recovering to personally thank the soldier whose actions had potentially saved hundreds of lives. When Maria regained consciousness 3 days later, she found General Hayes sitting beside her hospital bed. The general stood and rendered a crisp military salute to the wounded soldier. "Sergeant Santos," General Hayes said formally, "on behalf of the United States Army, the coalition forces, and every soldier whose life you have saved through your extraordinary service, I salute you. Your actions on that mountain represent the finest traditions of military excellence and personal courage." The general's salute was witnessed by dozens of medical personnel, visiting officers and recovering soldiers. Word of the unprecedented gesture spread throughout the military community within hours. For a 4-star general to salute an enlisted soldier was virtually unheard of, reserved only for the most exceptional circumstances. "Ma'am," Maria replied weakly from her hospital bed. "I was just doing my job," General Hayes smiled. "Sergeant, What you've accomplished goes far beyond duty. You've redefined what's possible for a single soldier to achieve. The Taliban commanders you eliminated were planning attacks that would have killed hundreds of our people. Your mountain defense saved an entire company of Marines who were approaching the valley. You are quite simply one of the finest soldiers I have ever had the honor to command. As Maria recovered from her wounds, the full scope of her achievements became clear. Over 15 months of deployment, she had completed 21 high-value target eliminations, disrupted countless enemy operations, and saved hundreds of coalition lives. Her final mission had broken every record for long-range precision shooting and sustained combat effectiveness. The same soldiers who had once mocked her small stature and questioned her place in the military now spoke of her with reverence. Maria Santos had become proof that excellence knows no boundaries, that determination can overcome any obstacle, and that sometimes the most unlikely heroes achieve the most extraordinary things. She returned home to a hero's welcome, carrying with her the respect of every soldier she had served with, and the knowledge that she had given everything in service to her country and her fellow warriors. The girl they had once laughed at had become the sniper they all aspired to be.